Secret guardians, starry bright, fiery ones beyond our sight, saints of yore, Buddhas too, guiding lights to me and you.
Chapter 3 Belfast, Northern Ireland, Ardoyne District. Burn Residence, December 1998. 3 years later, I lost my grandmother. It was a devastating blow. I was 16 at the time. It was the advent of the Christmas season, a joyous time of year I'd always loved. At a farmer's market, Mola and I bought a lovely little pine in a wicker planter. That afternoon, we dived into Christmas decorating. Mola dug out our ornaments and began decorating the tree while I unpacked our creche, which had been handed down in the family from my great-grandparents. My job was to set up the creche, so I carefully placed Mary, Joseph, the shepherds and their lambs, the 3 wise men, and a lone brown cow around baby Jesus, who was lying in a manger of real straw. The next day our lives fell apart. While at work in Upper Malone, Mola suffered a massive heart attack. No one else was home at the time, but somehow she managed to phone for help before collapsing. She was rushed to Belfast Hospital. A parent of a schoolmate pulled me out of class and took me to see her. By the time I got to her bedside, she was hooked up to machines and barely conscious. The doctor took me aside. He told me her lungs were filling up with fluid because her damaged heart couldn't keep up. I sat with her, holding her hand while whispering Hail Marys and telling her that I loved her. My heart was breaking. It wasn't long after I arrived that her once strong aura began to fade. It strengthened just for a moment, as if with all her might she was fighting to stay alive for me, I believed. But it wasn't to be. Not long after, I felt an infinitesimal squeeze of my hand so faint I almost missed it. It was her goodbye to me. My tears came. One moment I saw her colours, and the next they faded to nothing. With her body broken beyond repair, her soul took its leave. "Angels, take her," I said aloud. "Take her home." It was a commanding prayer, almost fierce in its intensity. From where it came in me, I don't know. All I did know was that my grandmother deserved to be cared for wherever she was going, because all she had done her whole life, with nary a thought for herself, was care for others, especially me. As I walked home from Mola's funeral service, the rain chilled me to my marrow. Mola hadn't been Catholic, but everybody at St. Francis had known and loved her. As she had no church of her own, the parish priest generously allowed a tribute to her life to be held at St. Francis. Afterward, I was supposed to ride with the funeral procession to Milltown Cemetery for the burial. But I just couldn't do it. After I made it clear I couldn't handle going, a number of people offered to be with me and take me home. I turned them all down. A few of my classmates overheard and approached me with an invitation to join them for a meal at a local eatery. Another school friend, with her concerned parents hovering in the background, invited me over so I wouldn't have to spend the night alone. I passed on these offers too, though they were most kind. I couldn't bear to be around others any more that day, no matter how well-wishing they were. I was almost home on Crumlin Road when I came upon one of the boys I'd watched from our row house roof. Though I didn't know his name, I'd passed him on the street a time or two, and he'd actually smiled at me, which was unusual for the hard lads that hung out there. "Harya?" he greeted me as I approached. That smile again, with real warmth.
It's absolutely Baltic, innit? I wouldn't put a dog out in it.
He shrugged his coat closer to his face.
So why are you out? On your way home, then?
I nodded, barely acknowledging him.
Mind if I walk you, then? You shouldn't be out by yourself.
I just live over there, I mumbled, pointing up the street.
You're alone, aren't you?
The boy's question hit me square in the chest. I actually stumbled. Whether on a crack in the pavement or from the weight of his comment, I don't know. He caught my arm, and then my expression.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Hey, I just meant you're walking alone. Not the safest, you know. Good Friday Agreement or no, Belfast's still a rough place, innit?
Oh, was all I could manage. I was barely functional. I was alone now, truly. I'd never realised how much Mola, with her steadfast ways, had given me a sense of family, despite it being just the two of us. Now it was just me.
I'm Brogan, and you are?
The boy asked. His voice startled me. I was so much in my own sad world that I hadn't noticed he'd joined me. I also hadn't noticed how dark his aura was. It flashed in me that I'd promised my grandmother to ignore such things. I hadn't been able to keep that promise. Jian, I answered hesitantly. Brogan butchered the pronunciation. It's Jian, I corrected. Part of me wondered why I was even having the conversation, basic as it was. I was not in any shape to string words together. Brogan got my name right on his third try. All right.
But what kind of a name is Jian?
He asked, with a lopsided grin. It's a name like any other, I replied not so brilliantly, then tried to explain. My mum was born in Taiwan, so I guess it's Chinese. My father's Irish, though. I don't know why I made the last comment. Perhaps I was afraid that by my looks he'd think I was an immigrant, though my Belfast brogue should have clued him otherwise. We turned the corner and ran head-on into the icy mist that ruled the day.
That's all you know about your own name?
Suddenly the warmth I'd felt fled. The parents I'd not known hadn't provided that history lesson, obviously. What about your name? I replied, more to deflect his question than anything. There was his easy smile again. I finally registered his fine looks, with his unruly head of brownish curls and matching beard. It helped me forget myself for a few seconds.
Saint Brocken? St. Patrick's nephew legend is.
Brogan had used the Gaelic version of his name. At least I knew that much. By the time we reached my building, I was completely done in. I could tell he wanted me to invite him in, but there was no way I was going to do that.
When can I see you next?
He asked, as I turned to go inside. An uneasy feeling came over me. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. Don't know, I answered. I've just come back from a funeral. My grandmother's. I hoped the comment would back him off.
Oh, I'm sorry for you,
he said.
You must have been close.
Yes, was all I could reply. I thanked him for walking me home. As I closed the door, he gave me a half-hearted wave. From the window out of his sight, I watched him walk back toward Crumlin Road. Brogan turned out to be persistent in his pursuit of me, and as I had zero social life and now no family, I finally gave in out of sheer loneliness. I soon found out that my first instincts about him were correct. Brogan was a lost lad, even further out to sea than me. Deep into smoking hashish, he lived from hand to mouth, scratching out an existence through dealing hash and shoplifting. Our relationship didn't last long. When he began pushing me to get physical with him, I just couldn't go there. The end was the day he got me to try hashish. We were in a back alley hide he'd found, just a weed-choked patch behind an abandoned building set back off Crumlin Road. The first hit I took from his pipe burned my lungs and then my soul. Within minutes I was falling into a blacker hole than I'd ever known. After Brogan, the cracks in me broke wide open. I left off attending Mass, a grievous step for a Catholic girl. I began spending my nights out, searching for anything that might fill the hole in my heart. When word got out that I was no longer with Brogan, other boys began to come on to me. I tried going out on dates. They invariably ended with me resisting their advances. I fell in with a strange lot, whose favourite pastime was getting high, of which I didn't partake. At least I thought I didn't. Until the night I realised I was. Late one evening, after the ritual sharing of the hash pipe around our circle, me declining as usual, I began laughing strangely. Right then I knew. I was getting high by just being in the same room with smoke. I wasn't wasted, like the first time with Brogan, but I was definitely high. And this time, I didn't seem to care. I kept hanging with the same crowd. I was the quietest of the bunch by far. By now the boys viewed me as not all there, though that didn't stop them flirting with me. I was dimly aware that I was falling, but I couldn't stop. Every morning, after a night out, I would wake bleeding sadness, as if my soul had been sucked dry the night before. It had. Entities, like the ones I'd seen feeding on others, were now infesting me. I felt damaged and abandoned. But somehow I kept going, as if part of me was on autopilot. I knew I had to find a way to survive on my own, for if I didn't, I was sure I would be sent to live with a foster family, or worse, to a home for girls. Mola had always been frugal to a fault, and as I was the one who managed our money, I knew that I would be alright for a while if I was careful. So I came up with a plan. I started telling everyone my aunt was coming to live with me, so I could remain in our apartment, even if by myself. I knew that sooner or later my ruse would be discovered, as my aunt was imaginary, but I was banking on being able to maintain the fiction until I turned 18. Lying in my own bed at night, high or not, I would recite the prayers I'd said ever since I was a child, even though I could no longer feel the presence of my other mother, Saint Mary. I wondered if I'd been forgotten by heaven. Probably, I thought. After all, I deserved to be. And the truth, shown to me years later, was the opposite. The holy ones were holding on to me for dear life, doing all in their power to keep our thread of contact from breaking.
I hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in Jian's world in Chapter 3 of The Girl Who Walked into the Light. In our next Secret Guardians episode, we take a look at how easy it is for a soul to get lost on this dangerous planet. Until then, may you walk steadfastly in the light.